I know this thing is on, and I know that you can hear me. Nursing and healthcare needs advocates and activism. So what are you waiting for? Let's do the damn thing. Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to health and healthcare at the intersection of politics. My name is Amie Archibald-Varley, and I'm the Gritty Nurse. Today we have an amazing guest who's going to come on in just a couple minutes to talk about, some of the challenges that we're seeing in relation to maybe the word feminism, a little bit about the manosphere, and definitely about the intersections of neurodivergence and neurodiverse individuals. And I think that's, again, such an important conversation. Like, just over the last couple days and weeks, we've been talking about various different things. And for example, I'll just throw out this one. So, we're talking about Tylenol, we're talking about autism. Of course, there is no correlation, does not equal causation. And I'm just going to put it out there again. If you have a fever in pregnancy, the best medication as an antipyretic to take is Tylenol, bar none. Anyhow, again, making sure that you include neurodivergent people in the conversations. I see lots of people talking about it, but I don't see people talking to people who have been diagnosed with autism about these conversations. I definitely hear them at home because my husband has autism and so does my son, and we have these conversations, and it's important to hear that perspective. So with that being said, I'm so excited that we have this guest who's going to bring her perspective, because we need to learn. We have to hear from different people and understand their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jayne Gallays to the Gritty Nurse Podcast. Jayne, how are you doing today?
I am excellent. And thank you for having me on. I'm very excited to have this conversation, and hopefully everybody listening finds it as interesting as I do.
I'm sure. Like, I think there's a lot of different things we're going to hit on here, and I think it's more than an important conversation to have. So, as we get started, I always like to make sure that our guests have an opportunity to kind of discuss who they are and their background. So, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, Jayne, your background, and how you landed into this role of advocacy. I found you through Twitter, and I'd say that we're like Twitter besties. We have a lot of different things that I'd say that we think very similarly, and we kind of approach it, I'd say, with the similar grits. So, just a little bit about yourself, how you landed into advocacy.
Well, I was an early diagnosis kid back in the very early 90s. So there's step one. Back in 1991, it was not at all common for girls to be diagnosed with, back then the diagnosis was ADD, but of course it's changed with the DSM-5 coming out. And any kind of indication that a girl could be autistic during that time was unheard of. Like, it never happened. It was considered to be something that mostly affected boys, except for really extreme cases. So from day one, I was kind of in my justice sensitivity mode. And that just kind of continued through adulthood. Experienced a lot of the same things that young neurodivergent girls do. I was abused pretty severely and went through, child sexual abuse and all that kind of stuff. Ended up in an abusive relationship with a man when I was 14. He was an adult. Missed out on having access to education because nobody really prioritized that for me. And I was a child. I had no control over anything, right? So then when I became an adult and I had my own children who were neurodivergent and needed somebody to advocate for them, I started learning about their different diagnoses and how to properly advocate for them in a system that is really designed to set them up to fail,
Right.
particularly young girls, particularly neurodivergent girls, and witnessing the disparities in how my daughter was treated versus how my son was treated, and then later on my other boys, really kind of, it piqued my interest into why this happens to neurodivergent girls and what can be done about it and how we can sort of stem the bleeding in our community and support each other in effective ways instead of, there's a lot of fluff, there's a lot of toxic positivity. Oh, it's a superpower, and that's great. I love
Right.
that I can say, I'm a freak in the sheets. I love accounting. It's weird and people don't get it, but it's what I do.
Right.
But we also have to acknowledge that we are at an increased risk. We are vulnerable people,
Right.
and pay attention to those intersectionalities where boys, neurodivergent boys, are also more vulnerable, but they're not quite as vulnerable as neurodivergent girls because of the differences in the way society treats boys at a base level. And
Yeah.
then you get into talking about neurodivergent children of color, Black neurodivergent children, neurodivergent children of immigrants. Like, it's just a cascade of terrible treatment that primes kids to accept terrible treatment going forward in their lives, right?
Yeah,
So,
no. Yeah, I would say first and foremost to you, like, thank you for sharing your story with me. Again, I'm so sorry that your childhood was robbed in that way. And it's actually I don't want to say like a familiar story, but I do know of other neurodivergent people who were sexually abused in their early years. And again, I think one of the things that we're working on with my own son who has autism too is that advocacy piece because it's so, for example, if he goes to school and something horrible happens to him or something bad happens to him, he will not actually divulge that information to me. He's lucky because he has a twin and sometimes that twin is around. But in terms of that advocacy piece and saying, hey, something this might have happened to me or whatever the case may be, that is something that as a parent, I'm learning that I have to continually be teaching him. And again, I think that it does our children who are neurodiverse, it does put them at more risk. And it's unfortunate that there are people out there that'll take that position of power, knowing that, there is that difference in the ability in terms of thinking and understanding. And really, my son is super trusting as well. And they'll take advantage of that. And it's so disgusting. It's abhorrent. And I'm so sorry that you experienced that. So I just want to say that right off the top. And I think that you're right. As a society, we need to do much better in terms of understanding where people are coming from. And then again, just that teaching of our children, like you mentioned, that, there is this difference in terms of how men versus women or girls or boys are treated differently when it comes to neurodivergent. I see it all the time. I'm sure you see it as well. And again, it's another issue. That's probably like a whole other podcast episode that we need to talk about too. And then just diving back to the fact that you're just like, and again, this is just like that hitting home that point again, where we're talking about this conversation around, autism and Tylenol, where it's like, oh, more people are being diagnosed. It must be because there's more Tylenol. It's like, no, more people are being diagnosed because there's better awareness of, neurodivergence. There's better tools and techniques in terms of how we can recognize someone having autism. And that autism has existed long, long before Tylenol was
mm,
ever invented. So
indigenous
just
communities
squashing
have
some
their
of those
own.
ridiculous myths that we've been hearing over the past couple days.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back to the conversation related to, girls, women, those who identify as women in this world when it comes to neurodivergence, right? And I think we have to talk about, what are some of the differences that you see? And I think that's probably the question that I have. What are some of the things that you notice right off the top that are different?
Well, it's so hard to organize it in my mind. There are so many factors that are just a little bit different for girls than they are for boys, women than they are for men. The easiest thing to pinpoint is probably just the expectation of how we handle big feelings.
Right,
We are taught, girls in particular, are taught from, toddlerhood to basically gaslight ourselves into not reacting to being mistreated, being uncomfortable. We're told that our own perceptions are unreliable,
right,
and for neurodivergent people in general, that is such a damaging thing to have happening consistently through your whole life. You're being told, oh, your tag isn't scratching you. You're making it
right,
up. You're not in pain. You're not, we're at the mall. What do you mean the lights hurt your brain?
right,
And a neurodivergent child might be in real distress. And the people they trust most are telling them that they're imagining it or they're making it up. The tendency to place sort of a villainous cast on people who are trying to express their discomfort. And this is
right.
something that really happens to women a lot. Anytime you say, I'm not comfortable with this, you get the raised eyebrows immediately. in every
Right.
go to your doctor and say, "I'm in pain," and they're like, "Are you though? Are
Yeah,
you
that's so
making it?"
frustrating.
Yeah, and so when you think about how that dynamic affects the way that a person thinks about their own instincts and how to protect themselves, I mean, maybe I'm just looking into the patterns too much, but to me, it's like obviously the end result of this is going to be that this person who has experienced this their whole lives doesn't recognize that their partner is abusing them, doesn't recognize that they, should say something, or maybe they're afraid to because they're going to be cast as the villain in this story again. And it happens.
Yeah. I
So,
yeah.
yeah, just that dynamic of girls sort of being taught from day one to tolerate, just tolerate it, just tolerate, smile.
Yep. Yep, no, you're
The fundamentalists say, stay sweet, right? So
right.
people like you.
Smile more, right? No, I completely agree with you, and don't even gaslight yourself into feeling that you're thinking too much about it or that you're reading too much into it. I'm pretty certain that those things are real and that they do happen and they are still occurring. I mean, again, just bringing it back to, President Trump being out there saying, just deal with it. Just whatever the pain is, just deal with it, just bear it. And again, that like so that's that one added layer of, being a woman and being gaslit, but then add in, like you mentioned, neurodivergence, disability, any of these other aspects, and it's much more damaging, much more crippling. And I think it's just, we have to have these conversations and then not just have them, but do something about them. So I think even just us talking today is another way to say we don't agree with this manosphere, the status quo, this way that, women are demonized in this way. And then like you said, that added layer of intersectionality, whether you're neurodivergent or if you have a disability, that extra added pressure, again, we know that there are adverse outcomes to, women, to neurodivergent folks, and it just gets worse when we add on those various different layers. So something has to be done and said. And again, that's why we're out here advocating, right? I want to turn the page a little bit to talk about feminism because I think this is a really important aspect. I know your title here is The Joyful Defiant Feminist on Twitter. And I think that the conversation about feminism is starting to shift. And it's making me laugh a little bit because I'm seeing that there are certain groups out there trying to redefine what feminism is and what feminism looks like. And I think that, we're not going to buy that crap, right? We're not going to buy the whole aspect that, this redefinition as feminism is considered as man hating. It's BS. Or feminism is considered as anti tradition. Again, another talking point from these, I'd say, radicalized groups that are unrealistic of the idea behind feminism, or feminism as hypocrisy or victimhood culture. Again, these are just these talking points that are not accurate in relation to how feminism actually looks, and lastly, the idea that women who speak out or vocal or use their power to talk about, being a woman or seeing the problems there are with whether it's research, women's health, all of these different things, or women in policy, that it's considered woke or tyrannical. What would you say your definition is of
That is kind of a tough one because I feel that feminism is more of a verb than a noun.
all right?
Um, I practice feminism in my everyday life.
Mm,
I take on the things that bring me joy with a blatant disregard for whether or not they've been gendered by society.
mm,
I do not live my life in an effort to please or appease the men around me. And that is a relatively new definition for me. I mean, I've gone through the phases of feminism that most of us go through, um, from not really fully having a concrete idea of what it means to me and just kind of reading some books and kind of
right.
trying to put it together. And then you go through your everybody goes through kind of I hate pink, pick me phase when they're
Right,
young
right, right, yeah.
without understanding why. I mean, maybe not everybody. There's exceptions to every rule, but my anecdotal evidence suggests that we've all been there. And then finally, choosing how you are going to mold yourself to function in society. And I think feminism is how we function in this society, right?
No, I think that was so powerful, Jane. Like I think the fact that you see it as a verb, as an action, is something that we do. I think that's hugely powerful, and I really like that added piece where you mentioned like it's not the way you move about the world and the way that you do and see the world is not for the pleasure of another individual. I think that is like hugely progressive and super dope, and I'm like, yes, that's kind of where I'm standing too. And yes, I did do some reading as well in terms of where I land. And again, I'd like to say to those people that feeling that and being in that positionality is not man hating. I think that's where a lot of folks really mess up the idea behind feminism, where they're just like, oh, you just don't like us. It's like, no, based on society, based on the system, we are not going along in these lines where our role is to be benefit or pleasure or adjacent to or behind. None of that. We don't ascribe to that. And I think how you described it is very powerful. And I thought you were like, oh no, I don't know how to describe it. You definitely did. I think you definitely did that some justice. But again, being outspoken as a woman is challenging during this day and age. And I shouldn't even say during this day and age. I think these challenges have always been there. And I would say probably with the advent of, online technology, the way that we can be abused in this way has changed. So of course, maybe back in modern days, they'd spread their lies through conversations, like talking. Again, I did lots of work actually. This is just a random aside about me. I was very interested in like the Salem witch trials, and again, I think this was another way that when men didn't understand something, they would take these stories and make them up about women, and this is how the information would spread to victimize and punish women for being knowledgeable, for being wise, for speaking out against things that they saw in their society. And it's the only thing that's different now is there's technology, and they could reach a further way. They could be a little bit more, I guess, hidden. But again,
Mm.
like I want to talk about that. So my question actually says, what is wrong with men right now? They need therapy. They
Oh, we're
really
gonna
need
need a
help.
longer
Like, I mean, a
podcast.
lot of the problems we're seeing are related to, men not being able to express or talk about their feelings. But really, as much as we're laughing, like, I think there's a huge concern in the way that when a man is disagreeing with what a woman has to say online, that somehow it turns to threats of abuse, physical abuse. We've seen the verbal abuse, but it's definitely this physical abuse where they want to exercise some form of control by saying to another individual, well, I'm going to harm you in this sexual manner. And I think that's problematic. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Ooh, um, I definitely think that this is an important question for society as a whole to address. My take so far in my life has been that men have been, and boys from a very young age, because of the structure of the society that we live in. It is a patriarchal, capitalistic society that is very focused on power and control, right? We also here in Canada and also people in the US and Britain and we are being raised in a society that is, patriarchal, capitalistic, and it's colonizer sort of mentality, which when you take that into account with the behavior of men, especially when they can be anonymous, it makes sense. This sort of power structure that has existed for so long in our little Western pocket of the world, because I don't necessarily think this is normal everywhere else,
Right. I agree
right?
with you.
Has conditioned men to believe that this is the best way to regain control of a situation. So when they see a woman who is well spoken and people are listening to her and she's saying things that I don't like, they haven't been taught that they need to also be eloquent and respectful in their response. They've been taught that they can smash her to smithereens and it'll be okay. It'll be allowed. And we see this in our justice system. We see this broadly across society where, women are held responsible for the behavior of men.
Right.
So in an online space, when a woman is outspoken and a man is DMing her death threats, which has happened to me a million times, it's her fault for being too loud, right? She's the tall stalk of wheat and she needs to be cut down. And he was just doing what men do. They can't control themselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
If a woman is assaulted and she's out and about, it doesn't matter if she's, fully covered from head to toe or if she's walking around in a bikini. It was her fault for standing out because men can only do what men do.
Yeah. It's a
And
horrible, horrible excuse.
yeah, and it's so harmful. Because you're victim blaming women all over the place, again, conditioning women to tolerate abuse. But also, it is so sort of demeaning towards men, particularly good men who
Right.
do what they should be doing and they stand up and they say, hey, that's not okay. And they, try and create good spaces in their communities because there are shockingly men that do that.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah, despite everything that's against them in their efforts, they are trying. And then society goes, men can't control their baser urges. Men are not intelligent enough to handle a loud, outspoken woman. It doesn't make sense. And yet we continue to sort of fall for this lie. But that's what I think is kind of going on. And I'm hoping that we're going to see a shift as millennial men who have, by and large, worked really hard to be better men than their fathers were and their grandfathers were, sort of step into their role as elders for the younger generation. We'll see what
Yeah, no,
happens.
I think you're 100% right. And I think that again, we have to fight these conversations and these narratives that are happening because these redefinitions are really ridiculous. They really ignore the impact that women have. They turn it as the conversation that we have as empowerment as somewhat threatening. And again, a lot of the arguments that I have seen online, if they do try to argue some of the points that we come up, they use straw man arguments. They're not very strong arguments. Circling back to that last point you said, where, we need to teach young boys and young men about some of these manosphere things. So actually, I'm gonna play a quick clip from TikTok that I saw that really dovetails really nicely into this.
Young men don't like taking orders from women. I'm sorry, it's just a fact of life. Education is incredibly feminine in its approach and also in its staffing. 75% of teachers before 8th grade are women. Nothing against women teachers, but this is a truism of life.
What does truism mean?
Trust, risk, and security management. How is that supposed to make you feel?
But it's supposed to make you feel like men should not be taking orders from women.
What does he say after that?
Teachers before 8th grade are 75% women.
And then combine that with young men don't like taking orders from women. What is that message saying?
He's saying that boys like us do not like taking orders from teachers.
Who benefits if you believe this message?
Young men, because it's saying that if you're a young man, you should not take orders from women because it doesn't make you feel good. Trust, risk, and security management.
What do you think he is implying that the problem is?
Trusting a woman teacher is risky.
According to him, for who?
Young men.
And how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel like he is very incorrect. Makes me angry.
If your best friend believed this message, how would it affect him?
Probably wouldn't listen to woman teachers. It would just be a big mess.
Does it kind of give misogynistic vibes?
Yeah.
How could this message be improved?
Even if you don't like your teacher, you still should respect them because they're trying their hardest to teach you stuff. It doesn't matter if you already know how to do this. It's like a review for you. Listen, don't interrupt or anything. Maybe you learned something you didn't know.
That's right.
You were able to hear that, right?
That was a great video. I love that.
Right? So this is exactly where I think we need to be leading the direction we need to be leading, because the consequences of, this whole idea behind the manosphere is quite concerning. And it really just shows to me that because of the misinformation, it just shows that there's just a lot of there's the misinformation piece. It reveals that, there's clearly some deeply insecure men, about their roles, about how the world is changing. And these are a part of the conversations that we need to have, right? Like, I think that mom doing that is doing that is doing the work. And I think it'd be great if dad was there too. And maybe there's no dad in the picture, which is whatever it is. I can't say that, but I think that if both sides could have that conversation, like, how powerful is that? Because that's how you change and that's how you interrupt the narrative. Because really, there's a lot of online targeting to young boys and young men in relation to this conversation. There's this whole idea between like gender equality. It's not universally accepted. It may be triggering to some folks, and this is where we might see that backlash. And that, again, we know that the patriarchy does not just harm women. It poisons how men see themselves, their worth, and their relationships. So again, this is why we need to challenge toxic beliefs and really, we're seeing, like you said, this lashing out of men, violently, verbally, sometimes physically, as a means of reasserting control. And it is just not the way to go about things. So like I said, men, you need some therapy, you need some help. But again, the other question I want to ask you, because we are talking about those intersections about patriarchy and neurodivergence, where do you see the conversation in relation to patriarchy and ableism? How is this important to you?
Well, patriarchy and ableism really go hand in hand. In a patriarchal society, it is the able-bodied man that is at the very top of the pyramid of important people with power, right? And historically, we've seen that that's not a great structure.
Right.
You need everybody in the society to be valued and respected in order to have a healthy society. And that I love social media for the ability of experts to get their information out there, because the number of archaeologists and anthropologists I've seen talking about ancient societies, because we see these, He-Man, Master of the Universe guys talking about, "Oh, you wouldn't have survived back when," and it's not true. It's just blatantly false. People in ancient societies took care of their disabled family members or community members. They took care of them so that they could live until old age and die of natural causes. Right. They took care of injured community members repeatedly. People who had, chronic health conditions that they wouldn't have been able to diagnose back then the way we can now, but they knew what this person needed and they provided it because that person was valuable to them in their society. And this is before capitalism. This is before the Industrial Revolution, when everybody had a monetary value assigned to their life. And so this idea of the able-bodied man being the paragon of what society wants to be has to change. And
Yeah.
we are seeing that shift already, and it's really cool to see. But there is, like you said, there's so much pushback from these regressive groups that, they're still using arguments about feminism from the 60s.
Right.
The card carrying man hater is such an old, outdated trope it's been disproven over and over and over again. I'm a married mother of 5 children. Like, you're gonna tell I've been a stay-at-home mom. I've homeschooled my kids. Granted, it was the pandemic and I had to,
Yes.
but like, I've baked my own bread from scratch. Okay, you can't tell me that I haven't done, played the trad wife game. And yet, even at my gardening and an apronist, I was still a feminist because I
Right.
wanted other women to have the choice in their lives of how they move through the world. So I think that the regressive movement is going to eventually fall apart because they're gonna start someday. How far back in time can you really want to go? Right?
Right.
Their arguments don't make sense. They're outdated, they're nonsensical, and the people that hold on to them the most ferociously are coming up to their expiration dates. So goodbye. Let us
No, I agree with you. And I think that, again, like you mentioned anthropology, and I actually had done 3 years of sociocultural and biological anthropology at U of T. Back to even just talking about hunter-gatherer societies, this is like, the women who were gathering were the ones who were doing a lot of the work. And recognizing the role that women played, the matriarchy was very, very powerful. And I think that you're right, that there is a shift. And again, the more we continue to empower our young boys and our young men about the real knowledge behind women's roles, or the real conversations between, men, women, gender diverse folks, and clear up some of these misconceptions, the better they will feel equipped to, one, deal with their feelings and emotions, and two, be able to say, hey, what that other dude is saying is wrong. And this is how we should be looking and doing things, and how we should be treating women and gender diverse people, and neurodivergent people as well. So I am mindful of the time, and I'm going to wrap this up. But again, what do we need to tell our leaders? Because we do see that this is a growing issue. And how do we remain safe? And how do, particularly neurodivergent women, how do we build community and fight back against the patriarchy?
Well, there's
Sorry,
a
another
lot.
two huge questions, but like, do
There's a
your
lot
best
that has to go
with the
into it,
time. Yeah.
really. Finding each other, and social media is great for this. I met my best friend in the whole wide world, Stacy, on Twitter, and we've been causing problems for men now for 5 years together.
Amazing.
And I really think that finding each other so that we can sort of overcome the social conditioning that we have experienced in mostly isolation so far can, get that out of there, undo that nonsense, and stay organized. I know it's really hard, particularly for people on the left or progressives or whatever title you want to adopt for yourself in this dynamic. We have a hard time organizing and staying organized because most of us are really, really busy, and we're tired, and we're kind of, I know a lot of us feel really sort of defeated, and like, what else can we do? How many marches are we going to have? How many
Right.
protests? And now they're trying to make it illegal to protest, and we just have to keep doing it.
Right.
We have to keep showing up in whatever way that we can. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person at a protest, because not everybody can do that.
Right.
And that's where intersectionality matters. Some people are disabled and they can't come and march with you. Some people won't be safe in that situation. And that is another
Right.
really important consideration, is if you are having a demonstration of any kind, you need to consider the safety of your participants. So if you are counter protesting white supremacists, you need to consider, the people who are going to be targeted specifically by them, and make
Right.
sure that they have an out and they are protected, and that people who may have more privilege are prepared to deal with whatever situations might arise. And yeah, it's just comes down to pushing through the burnout and showing up, which is really hard, I think, for everybody. But continuing to have these kinds of conversations, is a huge, huge chink in their armor. They don't like this kind of
Yeah.
thing. So yeah, just keep
Well, too
being.
bad. Too bad. Like, yeah. No, I think you're 100% right. And I'm so glad that you were able to come and have this conversation with me and share your perspective as a woman who's neurodivergent. And yeah, we're going to keep showing up. Sorry if you don't like it. It doesn't matter. We're going to continue to be here. And, we won't be defeated. And I think that, you're right in terms of building community. Again, just that whole organization piece. I think people don't really know how much goes into planning an organization or a march or these different things to ensure that we do keep folks that are safe that come to. And then if you cannot come, again, like you mentioned, there are other avenues that you can lend your voice and advocacy. And then just speaking directly to men, like, there's a lot of work that you need to do on your end. Like, this is a lot of these problems are created by you. So
Yeah.
do your part and, show up and show out and talk to other men about some of this crazy, ludicrous behavior. Because again, we shouldn't shoulder the burden, but we are going to be out there saying, hell no, we're not going to take this lying down. So they don't like it. It's kind of too bad, because we are here to stay, right?
Mm.
Last words to you. Is there anything that we missed out or that you want to throw in that we haven't discussed?
We covered so much.
We did. We quite a landscape.
Yeah, I think I would just say for the people listening, if you have an opportunity to, build a relationship with another neurodivergent person or another person in whatever community you happen to be a part of, it is worth the effort. And I know a lot of people don't think about, making friends as, a lot of work, but for some people it is. You have to continually show up in your relationships and get over the initial hump of it and stick it out. It's worth it to have those people that can relate. It helps to undo the gaslighting that you've lived with your whole life. It helps to have somebody say, I totally get where you're coming from. That happened to me too. And, build your confidence because it protects you.
Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. And I think that you're 100% right, So I think with that, make sure that we find those connections and we find those neurodiverse people because, again, it's important to be able to shape different perspectives and learn from people with lived experience. So thank you so much, Jayne, for coming on the Gritty Nurse podcast. I'm sure we're going to have many, many more conversations. I can't wait to learn a little bit more about some of the work you're doing. I know you have a blog, so I'll make sure I post where people can find you. And yeah, we're in this together. And I think when I think about some of the things when people, particularly come about saying these horrible things, whether it is towards, neurodivergent people or women, that I think that when we stand together and we stand firmly against, hate, discrimination in all forms, that we can't lose. So I'm here. We're here. We're fighting and doing the good work. So thank you so much, Jayne, for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I look forward to talking again one of these days.
Absolutely. Oh, there's so much more. But yeah, thank you so much. Looking for a great gift for a nurse or someone who needs to learn about nursing? Check out my national best-selling book, The Wisdom of Nurses: Stories of Grit from the Bedside. Thank you so much for listening to The Gritty Nurse with Amie Archibald-Varley. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or any other podcast platform, please hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss out on any awesome episodes from The Gritty Nurse. Thank you so much and stay tuned until next time. Stay gritty.